this was equivalent on October the 7th to some 44,000 Americans being killed in one day and another 10,000 Americans being taken hostage. And nobody from left or right, Democrat, Republican, or anyone else has been able to persuade me that if that happened in this country, we would not tear up the earth to get those hostages back.
Hi guys, this is Sahar TV, and in this video, Douglas Murray was asked if Israel has gone too far in its war with Gaza. This is what he had to say. Let's take a look.
Do you think that Israel has gone too far at times and needs to be walked back?
Well, if I may say so, most of the criticism in the Western media and from, let's say, many politicians is there's been too many innocent deaths in Gaza and it's got to stop. Okay, that's broadly speaking the view. I always have a challenge to these people, which I simply say to them, fine, tell me how you would achieve the following. Let's say we're in New York. Let's say that New Jersey fires rockets for years. Let's say that for 18 years, the government there has used all money coming in to enrich themselves and to build a vast tunnel network in which they can store munitions and hostages and much more. And let's say that right next door to where you're living, this very densely well built up terrorist infrastructure invaded you, killed hundreds and hundreds of your people, took 250 more hostage. Tell me how you would operate in that terrain to ensure that you kill or capture all the leaders of the people who did this and wipe out their ability to ever rule that entity again. And secondly, how you get back 250 hostages. And I have yet to hear a critic of the Israeli government's actions give me a viable plan for how you would get back the hostages. And there are still several dozen hostages in captivity, some living, and how you would punish and kill the people who did that. Because just again, if you extrapolate out the population of Israel, about 9 million, to a population the size of the United States, this was equivalent on October the 7th to some 44,000 Americans being killed in one day and another 10,000 Americans being taken hostage. And nobody from left or right, Democrat, Republican, or anyone else has been able to persuade me that if that happened in this country, we would not tear up the earth to get those hostages back.
Yeah, but
What Israel is doing right now in the Gaza Strip has one of the lowest combatants to civilians death ratio in modern warfare history. And why is that? Because Israel actually cares about the civilians of Gaza. Any other country that would have been attacked the same way would have dropped far more bombs, would have killed far more people, would have restricted a lot more humanitarian aid, because at the end of the day, this is a war. In no way, shape, or form, a country being invaded by an enemy is required to supply that enemy, civilians, aid. And Israel is doing exactly that. They're providing them with aid. They're feeding them. They're giving them water. What kind of a weird situation is that? It's because of the international pressure coming from around the world.
But do you think the objective of defeating Hamas, is that possible? Is that possible as a goal?
Well, it's very interesting. Again, there's a type of criticism of the actions of the Israeli government and armies since the 7th of October, which, by the way, I should have said, in terms of fighting a war in a heavily built-up civilian area, the best analyses that we can get, because it's not easy, because everything, as you probably know, all of the death toll figures are the Gaza Health Ministry, which is Hamas. And I mean, the idea that Hamas has a health ministry is itself. But also, all the figures come from Hamas. But let's just concede, yes, a lot of people have been killed. But the best analyses of somebody like Spencer at West Point, John Spencer, is that it's probably a ratio of something like 1 terrorist to 1 civilian. Now, losing 1 civilian for 1 terrorist is terrible, but it is infinitely better than any operation the British Army, the American Armed Forces, or others have been. Most of the operating procedure of other Western armies is roughly 3 to 4 civilians for every 1 target. It's high, but the Israelis have massively outperformed our own past experience in Iraq, in Fallujah, and elsewhere, in slightly similar terrain. So just on that, it's very important to keep that in mind. As for the ideology, I have yet to be persuaded that there is something so extraordinary about Hamas as a force that their ideology can never be wiped out. We have seen many death cult ideologies in history.
The ones you mentioned.
The ones I
20th
mentioned,
century.
or let's just take one that, let's take Imperial Japan. The citizens of this country in states like this were told by many people in the 1940s there was nothing you could do. You could fight them. There was no way you would ever eradicate the ideology of the worship of the emperor and so on.
Great example.
And just consider what we knew about Japan as this country was fighting. I mean, we knew that this was an army that eventually had pilots who were willing to die whilst flying their planes into an American ship. Consider the fact that in places like Iwo Jima, American soldiers, young men, were fighting people who were fanatics very similar, different ideology, but a very similar type of fanaticism. If you'd have said then, in 2025, Japan will be more than within the community of nations. Indeed, will have been for decades. Will be a great success as a society.
Business leader.
Business leaders
democracy.
in everything. But you would have been able to find people, and you could find people, right up until the surrender. That again, in Japan, was inconceivable before the emperor was forced by this country and its military to cease. You would have found people who say there's nothing we can do to wipe that out. I do not believe there is something so unique about Hamas that among all the death cults we've seen throughout history, this one is uniquely virile. And I would just add that, look at the success of the IDF since October the 7th against all of these people, the individuals, the groups. It turns out that all the people that on American college campuses and on British college campuses, they mourned so much or they admired so much, they're all gone. And I've got news for those students, by the way, in America and Britain and elsewhere who've spent the last 18 or so months dressing up in Palestinian terrorist chic and
Queers for Palestine.
Queers for Palestine and so on. I mean, these at some point, I hope these young people grow up, but they've got a heck of a shock because everybody that they have claimed to admire, apart from being rapists and murderers and sadists, are also now dead.
Is that...
So they can continue to parade with admiration for Sinwar and Nasrallah and all the rest, but they're all encountering their 72 virgins.
On the point of not being able to destroy Hamas of their ideology, same applies to the Nazis. The Allied forces weren't able to destroy all of the Nazis 100%, yet the ideology was crushed to the ground. Right now we have Germans who live in Germany who are opposed to the Nazis, who are against the Nazis, who are for Israel, who support the Jews. So to say that we can't crush the ideology of Hamas and the people living in Gaza, that's just false. Douglas Murray, great speaker, always a pleasure watching him speak. And it's honestly amazing having such a strong individual support the Israeli side. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you'd like to support me financially. You can do that using Buy Me Coffee or Patreon down in the links in the description. If you'd like to join the Discord, it's going to be attached in the link below, and you can now become a YouTube member and enjoy specific YouTube perks. Thank you for being here. I'll see you again in the next video. Bye-bye.